TikTok could be banned in the United States as early as Sunday. And interestingly now, some of these TikTok users, seemingly in an act of defiance, are moving to an even more Chinese platform called RedNote. And it actually translates to Little Red Book, as in the teachings of former CCP leader Mao Zedong. Yes, that's actually true. And meanwhile, look, the US Department of Defense has designated Tencent as a Chinese military company. And this could have huge implications for tech and entertainment because Tencent owns huge swaths of the entertainment industry, especially with video games. And as all this happens, the US is also becoming increasingly aware of the security threats that the Chinese Communist Party poses and seems to be taking action against some of the platforms, technologies, and other things that they're involved with. We'll talk about these stories and more today, so let's jump into it. Now, first of all, on TikTok. Now, look, TikTok may soon be banned in the United States. It's over Chinese ties with the parent companies and how this may be influencing the platforms and the algorithms and how it may be feeding harmful content to your kids, maybe intentionally. And some users, because of this, because it may be banned, they're moving to an even more CCP-type platform. The case with TikTok right now is in the hands of the Supreme Court. It's now weighing the constitutionality of banning TikTok unless its China-based owner ByteDance sells it off. And as of now, it appears the ban is likely going to go through. Some TikTok users facing this, they've been instead jumping over to RedNote, also more officially called Little Red Book. The Chinese name is Xiaohongshu. The actual translation of that is Little Red Book, as in the teachings of former CCP leader Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, of course, being one of the main founders of the Chinese Communist Party, the one who brought communism to China. And if you're in China, if you're in the Communist Party, you need to read the teachings of Mao like a religious text. You have to do study sessions, you have to do self-criticism sessions, you have to do all these things. And so the idea that you'd have an app, Little Red Book, basically named after the teachings of Mao Zedong, shows even more closely how this relates, yes, directly to the Chinese Communist Party and its teachings and its interests. Now, look, this Sunday, the 19th of January, one day before Trump is inaugurated, January 19th is the deadline for when TikTok will be suspended in the US unless ByteDance sells it off. And ByteDance is not suggesting they're going to sell it off. They don't want to do that. They'd rather see this whole thing just get taken out, basically. And in the face of this, RedNote has jumped to the top of the US Apple App Store charts this week. And as of this morning, it was still there alongside another Chinese app called Lemon8 that's ironically also from the TikTok company. And what's really interesting is how this stuff got promoted, right? All right, one of the allegations against TikTok is that it has manipulated algorithms and it's feeding harmful content to American kids, while the Chinese version of it, puts things to Chinese children that are more healthy. And so while American kids are getting like suicide ideation, guides on how to steal cars, and then TikTok challenges to go and wreck these cars, and while they're getting crazy things like that, Chinese kids are getting, videos about how to take care of your parents, how to be a good student, and that type of thing. Isn't it ironic that suddenly, right before TikTok is going to be banned, the algorithm of TikTok is feeding these videos going viral on TikTok, promoting other Chinese apps? Isn't that ironic? Now look, it seems like some users are doing this more out of an act of defiance. They're unhappy TikTok might get banned. And to be clear, TikTok does not have to get banned. It's actually the choice of the parent company. China's ByteDance could sell the US operations and keep the whole thing running. They're choosing to not do that. And look, there were some rumors going around that they were considering selling it to Elon Musk. You might have seen that. They clarified these rumors were not true. They're not planning to sell it to Elon Musk. And at least they say, right? Now, if the ban does go through, it's also not likely that TikTok is just going to disappear off people's phones. But it probably will disappear from the app stores, and it will probably be more difficult for people to use if they do have it installed. There might be more problems and things like that. Now look, here's the bigger picture though. TikTok probably won't be the last app like this to get banned. You could actually see a lot of these Chinese apps get banned. The Lemonade app, also one of the top downloaded apps right now, is also from the same company. They're probably going to get banned too. And ironically, even RedNote, the one that's now trending, could very likely get banned as well due to its ties to certain Chinese companies, which I'll get into in a bit, but also because of a key U.S. law. The American law and the wording of it, which I'll explain to you, that is doing all of this. This stems from the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. Now, President Joe Biden signed that act into law in April of 2024, and Republicans and Democrats pushed it to his death. This is actually bipartisan. Now, this law gives the government the ability to ban foreign-owned apps if it determines that they're a threat to national security. And here's what the act says. Have a look. This is Congress. It says this bill prohibits distributing, maintaining, or providing internet hosting services for a foreign adversary-controlled application, e.g. TikTok, which it says directly. It's important, though, it says, for example, TikTok, but that does not mean it's limited to TikTok. This could be applied to many other things. Now, it says that under the bill, a foreign adversary-controlled application is directly or indirectly operated by one ByteDance Ltd. Or TikTok. It includes subsidiaries or successors that are controlled by a foreign adversary, which is very important. I'll get into in a minute. Or two, a social media company that is controlled by a foreign adversary and has been determined by the president to present a significant threat to national security. The prohibition does not apply to an application that is primarily used to post product reviews, business reviews, or travel information and reviews. The bill authorizes the Department of Justice to investigate violations of the bill and enforce the bill's provisions, and it notes that entities that violate the bill are subject to civil penalties based on the number of users. And a lot of these have a lot of users. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. The actual bill that was passed talks about TikTok and ByteDance, but it also extends to, quote, subsidiaries or successors that are controlled by a foreign adversary. Now look, do you know what RedNote could be considered? Well, RedNote could be considered a successor. It's actually pretty similar to TikTok, and with users now having their big exodus from TikTok to RedNote, it's also serving as a successor in that regard. But to get banned, RedNote would also have to be controlled by a foreign adversary, according to the direct language of this. Or it would have to be a social media company that is controlled by a foreign adversary and has been determined by the president to present a significant threat to national security. And look, guess what, folks? That may not be too far off. The problem TikTok has is its ties to ByteDance. And the problem ByteDance has, Chinese company again, is that if you're operating in China, CCP national security laws, Chinese Communist Party data laws, they do not give you the option of being independent from the Chinese Communist Party. All of your data needs to be observable and controllable by the Chinese Communist Party. You have to follow the interests of the CCP. Doing otherwise goes against their national security. You violate the law by doing that. You don't have a choice. And ByteDance even took it a step further back in 2018. The founder and CEO of ByteDance at the time, that's Zhang Yimin, he was forced to make a public apology to the Chinese Communist Party, and in his public letter, he voted to use his company, vowed to use his company to serve the interests of the CCP. He said this publicly, including on promoting the direct agendas of the CCP leader Xi Jinping. He vowed to adhere to the CCP's, quote, political consciousness and to the party's, quote, core consciousnesses. And these are actual party terms that relate to all the agendas of the Chinese Communist Party. He basically publicly declared that he would use his company to serve the interests and the agendas of the Chinese Communist Party. And also, he vowed to have his companies fall in line with Xi Jinping's agenda to push what is called socialist core values. This was public. This is not some random, behind the scenes thing. This was a public statement he made back in 2018. But look, this also isn't just a problem with ByteDance. This is also something that other Chinese companies face. We've actually seen similar public criticisms and public vows of companies to follow these exact same agendas of the Chinese Communist Party and of Xi Jinping himself, the leader of the CCP. And look now, Daily Caller, they had an exclusive piece that allegedly shows documents and recordings about how TikTok, including, yes, right here in the United States, TikTok forced staff to swear oaths to uphold China's socialist system. This is the Daily Caller saying this. They say TikTok required an American executive to sign an oath supporting China's socialist system and national interests, according to documents related to an employment discrimination lawsuit obtained by the Daily Caller News Foundation. It notes that former TikTok marketing executive Katie Paris alleged she was forced to sign an agreement with the tech giant's China-based sister company Douyin, swearing not to divulge state secrets. That's part of the CCP's national security law, by the way. To not disrupt national honor or undermine ethnic unity. Importantly, if you want to talk about disrupting national honor, that means not talking about the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party. If you say anything that makes the CCP look bad, you talk about human rights abuses, Tiananmen Square massacre, live organ harvesting, anything like that, it means you've disrupted national honor. You've made the CCP look bad. If you undermine ethnic unity, that means you're talking about the genocide in Xinjiang or East Turkestan against the Muslim Uyghurs. That means you're talking about the abuses of the Tibetans. That means you're talking about Taiwan independence or anything like that. Ethnic unity, right? And it notes, this is according to documents obtained by the Daily Caller News Foundation. It also says in the spring of 2024, Puris, the woman bringing the lawsuit, accused her employer as well as its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, and ByteDance's subsidiary Douyin, it's like the Chinese TikTok, of gender and age-based discrimination in a lawsuit that also alleges TikTok's day-to-day operations are controlled by ByteDance, something that they've publicly denied. Now, Puris, TikTok's former head of global brand and creative, alleged in her lawsuit that TikTok's executives are required to sign an agreement with ByteDance subsidiary Douyin that polices speech and demands compliance with China's socialist system. And it notes that after joining TikTok in December 2019, Puris was required to sign a user agreement with Douyin's Feishu employee stock ownership plan to access, quote, information concerning her equity grants, according to the lawsuit, and said, quote, you shall comply with applicable laws and guidelines and abide by public order and good customs, the socialist system, national interests, legal rights of other citizens, and information authenticity requirements. The purported Douyin agreement reviewed by the Daily Caller News Foundation states. It notes the document also lists a number of prohibited activities for employees, including, quote, overthrowing the socialist system, quote, inciting secession, quote, undermining national religious policies, meaning you promote religion because the CCP bans most normal forms of religion, or, quote, promoting cults and superstitions. The CCP labels most of the persecuted religions of the country as cults, and it also calls all religions superstition. The CCP even actually labels democracy activists as being part of a cult. It also goes against, it has injunctions against, quote, meaningless information or deliberate use of character combinations to avoid technical censorship. That's where in China people might use homonyms and things like that to get around the censors. Now, it also notes TikTok executives also sign agreements with ByteDance consenting to digital surveillance and report to China-based leadership, according to their documents and audio recordings supporting Puris's lawsuit. It notes that one confidentiality agreement, quote, for New York employees that ByteDance allegedly required Puris to sign apparently allowed the company to inspect TikTok executives' personal electronic devices. It says, quote, employee agrees to allow the employer to inspect any electronic device in employee's possession or under employee's control which is or was used by employee in the course of employee's employment in order for the employer to satisfy itself of employee's compliance with the terms of this non-disclosure obligations. Meaning, they can watch your devices. These Chinese companies ordering people, if you want to get a job at least, to swear your allegiance to the CCP, basically, right? Its socialist system and national unity and everything else, and to agree with all of its censorship laws disguised under these different labels, also wants to view your devices to make sure you're not maybe criticizing CCP human rights abuses, to make sure you're not talking bad about the Communist Party or the Communist Party leadership. They want to make sure and monitor you in the United States, in New York City, if you're doing that. This is, again, according to the alleged ByteDance agreement from the Daily Caller News Foundation. They received it. And notes that other documents also seem to indicate TikTok ultimately considered Puris to be a ByteDance employee. And this is deeply important because TikTok has been saying that they don't share their data with ByteDance, that ByteDance doesn't have control over these things, that it's separate operations, that the types of operations they have there have nothing to do with the stuff here, that the data of users is not being being sent over there, that the laws of ByteDance or the CCP are not being applied to the United States. This goes against all of that. This means basically that TikTok is just a little puppet, and the people working for it, including in America, are basically having to adhere to all the CCP's laws and requirements. But look, on to RedNote, people are going from TikTok to the Little Red Book, right? Or more accurately, again, the Little Red Book, because that's the Chinese name, directly translates to some of the company's main investors are Tencent, Alibaba, and Sequoia China. Just as one part of that, folks, the CCP took over Alibaba and then booted out its founder Jack Ma through a crackdown that started in 2021. Just last year in February, Business Standard wrote, quote, Alibaba discloses Chinese government ownership in over 12 of its business units. The filings come as China's ruling Communist Party said this month they will play a bigger role in steering the country's technology and science development. Meaning Alibaba and its ties to this may be a big problem for that company. And as for Tencent, the other big investor on this, Tencent is a major Chinese company. Now, interestingly, this is where it gets really big, maybe even bigger than TikTok. Tencent has a huge footprint in the United States. And Tencent just got officially labeled as a Chinese military company. I'll be talking more about this after I come back from a quick break. Please hit the like button. In the meantime, I'll be back in less than 60 seconds, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Folks, if you don't know what Tencent is, you might very soon. Tencent is one of the largest entertainment companies, has a huge footprint in the United States, video games, online programs, tons of stuff. And Tencent just got labeled by the Pentagon as a Chinese military company. Now look, this could have some broad implications for technology and entertainment, even right here in the United States. and maybe even RedNote, that's the, again, the app that these TikTok refugees are going to, even that has ties with Tencent. Tencent's empire is massive. Tencent owns the messaging app WeChat. It has been also buying up huge swaths of the video game market, and this includes many of the most popular video games currently there. If your kids play video games, there's a very good chance they're playing one made by Tencent or partially owned by Tencent. Now look, with this new designation from the Pentagon and with the U.S. law I mentioned earlier, the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act, Tencent could very soon go the way of TikTok, and this means a very large number of applications could soon get banned or maybe force the CCP's companies to divest from them. BBC said this. It says the U.S. has added several Chinese technology companies, including gaming and social media giant Tencent and battery maker CATL, to a list of businesses it says work with China's military. It says the list serves as a warning to American companies and organizations about the risks of doing business with Chinese entities. And notes that while inclusion does not mean an immediate ban, it could add pressure on the U.S. Treasury Department to sanction the firms. It says the Department of Defense's, again, DOD, list of Chinese military companies, which is formerly known as the Section 1260H list, is updated annually and now includes 134 firms, one of those being Tencent. And actually, CATL does batteries, including for Tesla, and so that's a big deal as well. But look, here's something else that's really important. As Tencent is buying up the video game market and the mobile video game market and getting a huge, huge footprint on devices, phones, laptops, computers, all across the United States. Now, Tencent also has what's called the Anti-Cheat Expert Program. The acronym for this is ACE. And if you play a Chinese video game, you might have this installed on your computer or your phone. Now, Anti-Cheat Expert is a kernel-level anti-cheat program that gets installed on your computer or phone if you install some of their games. You don't have to individually say you want to install it. It does it automatically. And which, by the way, includes a fairly large handful of the most played video games in the market right now. Now, on the surface, these are to monitor people's devices to make sure they're not cheating in video games. They're not using cheat codes or going on their things and doing things you shouldn't be doing. But there are also some real issues with them. Kernel level, which is the level of access this has to your device, it means they can basically see a level of data on your computer or your phone that you cannot access. They can see everything, just about. If Tencent really is a Chinese military company, as the Pentagon has now said they are, this could be extremely serious. Imagine how many people in major corporations or in banking or in government or in our military who may be playing video games and have this installed in their devices. Now look, just to emphasize why a kernel-level anti-cheat program could be a problem, this is an explanation on Medium about what that really means. Because, it's tech talk, right? This is Medium. It says kernel-level anti-cheating software is a type of measure that works by operating at the core of an operating system. So if you're using Windows or Linux or Mac OS, it operates at the core of that system. It says the kernel manages system resources and provides a bridge between the software, the programs on your computer, and the hardware, all the physical devices. And also, without the kernel, computers would not be able to run programs or perform essential tasks. Working at the kernel level allows the anti-cheat software to have deep access to the system and monitor activities that would be harder to detect at the application level of the video game. System calls, memory, mouse movements, everything you're doing, and lower-level computer processes can be monitored with kernel-level anti-cheat. It says this enables the software to detect manipulations of the game's memory, injection of code, or other low-level exploits. If you do anything, it sees it. And it notes this: due to its nature and access to sensitive parts of a computer, the implementation of kernel-level anti-cheat software can introduce variabilities to a system. It says the extensive access granted to kernel-level anti-cheat software poses inherent privacy concerns. It notes that as one seasoned kernel developer writes, quote, the kernel runs in a super privileged mode that allows calling any instruction your CPU can execute. This code also has free access to the internal data structures of the kernel, which are normally hidden from user processes. What this means is that this type of spyware can exfiltrate, steal, take it away, can exfiltrate sensitive information, control your computer, and record all of your activities and running programs. This individual adds, quote, these kernel-level systems are extremely dangerous. No game is worth the level of control you give to a developer. And people are giving that to Tencent. And then imagine also on top of that, the company you just gave that level of access to also happens to be designated by the Pentagon as a Chinese military company. It means you're giving the Chinese military, by extension of that potentially, all of your data, access to everything on your computer, access to be able to manipulate data, access to be able to steal information. And imagine with the popularity of these apps, how many people have this? Now look, this could actually be massive. I do not think it is fully sunk in for most people how serious this designation is and what it can mean for security in this country. A Chinese military program having this level of access on, you're talking some of these games have just tens of millions of users, and you're talking like many, many, many games. Now look, this also seems to be a bigger trend right now. The US government has been raising alarms over Chinese Communist Party data breaches. You might have seen things like the recent Salt Typhoon cyber attacks. Hackers with the CCP, they were able to breach the US telecom systems. They even breached the phones of President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance when they were on the campaign trail. It was reported the Salt Typhoon breach gave the Chinese Communist Party access, unprecedented levels, to US telecommunications networks. And it wasn't just that. The US government is also right now talking about banning TP-Link routers. I had one, I threw it in the trash. These are some of the most commonly used internet routers in the United States. About 65% of the routers sold in the US are TP-Link routers. And the problem is, well, it's a Chinese company. And they are right now being investigated by the US Department of Commerce. They're being investigated by the US Department of Justice, and they're being investigated by the US Department of Defense over concerns that this Chinese company may have something to do with the various CCP cyber attacks. Now look, it doesn't end there either. Now look, we've been hearing a lot about these risks. Alleged sourcing violations, other issues with Chinese e-commerce apps like Shein and Temu. The U.S.-China Economic Security Review Commission was even raising concerns of this back in 2023. It says this, right? Noting that these companies, Shein and Temu, that they probably have all kinds of violations they're possibly looking into. They're trying to close some of these loopholes as well. In September 2024, the White House took actions to close some of the trade loopholes that the Chinese companies were using in order to get around tariffs, some of them, and around package inspections, making it so that packages don't have to be looked at by our authorities when they come to the U.S. And look, in other words, it is really looking right now, across the board, if you look at the big picture, it looks right now like the looming TikTok ban is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what may now be unfolding. We'll see whether Trump continues this trend. He might not. But a lot of Chinese companies operating in the U.S. right now, they could be facing pressure on this, whether it be over national security concerns, data laws, threats to our kids, or even just issues with tariffs and trade. But on the other side of this also, there's something else. Under the Chinese Communist Party, many would argue there are not really any such things as fully independent companies. People say, oh, well, they're not tied to the CCP. There's no such thing in China. This goes into the very nature of the system the CCP has put in place. In China, right now, because they're under the Communist Party, everything has to follow the directives of the CCP. If you do not, you are labeled an enemy of the state. You're labeled a cult. Even democracy activists are labeled cults. You're labeled someone undermining, national security. You become an enemy of the state. If you don't do what they say, they throw you in prison. This is why the founder of ByteDance had to issue a public apology, the one I showed earlier, where he made this whole self-criticism and apologized for not following the CCP's directives closely enough. It's why he vowed to push Xi Jinping's agendas to bring socialist core values to everything he does within his companies. The Chinese Communist Party has even had rules on this, including to companies to have Communist Party cells in them. If you have a company of a certain size, you have to have a CCP, an actual Communist Party cell in your company. And they do that to Western companies as well if you operate in China, by the way. It has rules on data that force companies to give the CCP access. There's no such thing as data security in China. And even outside of China, the way a lot of academics categorize China's current economy under the rule of the communist regime, you know what they call it? They call it state capitalism. Many people point out, well, China is a very odd place. Under the Chinese Communist Party, they have a communist system, but obviously they have capitalism, they have businesses and so on. You know what it is? They call this state capitalism. And what is that? State capitalism is just a fancy way of saying that the state controls the systems of capitalism. That's it. It's basically just when you have a communist regime that allows businesses and trade to take place, but instead of having the military control all the companies, the ruling party controls the businesses instead and just maintains an illusion of a free market. The Chinese Communist Party controls everything, nothing outside of it. And anyone who does not let them do that, they get ousted, they get investigated, they get kicked out, like Jack Ma did at Alibaba. They have to go and publicly humiliate themselves with self-criticism letters and apologize to the CCP like the founder of ByteDance had to do. They have to do this because under the CCP, there is no such thing as a truly independent company. And this is going to be important because right now the US government is looking into possible security threats related to all these companies that we've been allowing into our country and onto our smartphones and into our homes and onto our children's devices that the CCP has a hand in. And they're now recognizing the threats the CCP represents through this whole channel. Now, what we're seeing right now with these looming bans of Chinese companies over security issues is very likely just the very start of something much bigger currently unfolding. And folks, that said, let's jump into some questions. So hit the like button, leave a comment, let's jump into it. All right, folks. Also, a lot going on right now. The presidential inauguration is coming up soon on Monday. The confirmation hearings are still underway. A lot going on. All right, let's see here. Hooked 911, you're saying nothing is free. They publish these game mods for a reason. Yeah, well, that's one of the big things people used to say when it came to like social media. That you were like, oh, hey, this social media company is free. Or this social media app is free. I'll just download it onto my phone. And people have made the point, well, if it's free, you are the product. You're the product. Your data is the product. Your activities are the product. There was this crazy article that just came out, and this sounds crazy, but there are companies right now looking at ways to advertise to you while you sleep. I'm not even joking. They're saying that some of this is already being experimented on, some of this is already happening. Imagine you're like sleeping and dreaming, and you start having dreams of like, I don't know, people drinking Pepsi or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know if they're involved with this, but that's what they're looking into. Companies buy your data. They want to know what your political views are. They want to know everything about you. They want to know how many kids you have. They want to know your marital life. Are you having problems in your relationships? What are you interested in? And what these companies do is they collect everything on you, every website you visit, sometimes even your phone calls. Did you know you can actually jump onto Google and you can look at recordings it has made of you? I don't know if they still do it. They were doing it several years ago, and you could actually opt out of it. But they would record you on your device, and you could actually listen to these recordings that it had made of you when you weren't even using your device. They take all this stuff and they form profiles on you. And then they sell those profiles to companies. They sell it. And what it means is these companies know your devices, your social media accounts, your different aliases, the things you do, the things you're interested in, the things you want, everything you're talking about. If you're having a conversation like, gee, I wish I had a blue bike. I wish I could buy a blue bike, and you jump online and you're like, wow, there's all these advertisements suddenly for blue bicycles. What a coincidence, right? Or maybe you go to sleep at night and you start having a dream about a certain company trying to sell you a blue bike. You know, we're heading that way very quick. There's articles right now saying that they're planning to do this. That's what they do, folks. I may sound like an old man here. How many of you remember when they were going to do the moon advertising? This is a bit off topic. Do you all remember this? There was an American company that wanted to be able to project advertisements on the moon. And there was outrage over it. When I read this dream thing, it made me think of that. I was like, man, this reminds me of when there was that weird company that wanted to like do that to the moon. And eventually they backed off of it. The first advertisement they were going to do by doing projections onto the moon was going to be some like beer company. I was kind of young at the time. All I remember was it was a beer company, and the logo was a horse. I can't remember which one it was. Do y'all remember that? They want to do things with dreams now. Imagine that. And the other scary thing is, imagine what they can do. If they can try to influence you with advertising, what else can they influence you on? Can they maybe push a certain political agenda? Could they change your political beliefs? Can they change the person you like or the person you dislike? Could they use this to puppeteer a society? Could they use it to demonize a certain media company, to make you not want to listen to a certain TV host, or maybe a person they deem as a dangerous conspiracy theorist because they don't want you believing in any kind of alternative narratives? For the Chinese Communist Party, this is what they do. And you know what's also important is, and I mentioned this before, I've been saying, hey, James, you're cracking me up. I've been saying before that, you know, TikTok is a good start. I do not believe we should have TikTok in this country. I think we should kick out every one of these apps that does these types of things. I don't think it should be allowed. Because it's not free speech if you have basically a propaganda platform trying to brainwash our kids, right? And they're obviously not free. If they're pushing socialist values, it's a brainwashing app. That's what it is, in my opinion. It's a brainwashing app. It's not free speech. But it's bigger than that. I mentioned these companies that basically make a living off selling your data. Some of these companies also sell your data to foreign companies. Some of these companies sell your data to governmental agencies. Some of these companies sell your data to people who want to monitor you and manipulate you and spy on you. And some of these companies sell your data in such ways that would normally violate the Constitution, because these governments would not be able to do that otherwise. They cannot carry out illegal searches and seizures unless they have a warrant. And this represents a type of warrantless spying being carried out on a massive level because of the public-private cooperation happening with it. And when it comes to foreign adversaries, it's even more of an issue because it has to do with the basic national security of this country as a whole. I think it's serious stuff, you know what I mean? Martin McKenzie, you're saying that the Chinese CCP is organized to take over and control others. It's no surprise that the military is involved in all business efforts. And Martin also notes, for those who can't give up being propagandized because it's so much fun. Yeah, you know, there's memes going around. When I'm bored, I like to look at funny videos and memes. It's one of the ways to entertain myself, folks. There are memes going around of like a robot that wants to kill you, you know, and they have these two memes. One is like, you know, the robot apocalypse, and people are like, oh no, AI is going to spy on us and take all of our data. And the way that sci-fi used to imagine the killer robots was, you know, you're hiding under your desk and there's like the Terminator walking through your building, right? The way that AI is actually doing this is AI is like some cute, you know, anime girl being like, tee-hee, give me your data. And then, you know, people fall for it. As soon as you put a cute face on it, it's like the whole relationship changes. And it's crazy how susceptible people are to this stuff. You know, people say that you know, we live under the same type of totalitarianism in some places in this world as like people did under the Soviet Union. The only difference is it has like rainbows and sparkles. You know, they throw a little confetti in there to make you think you're not like living in a communist hellhole. You know, you make like a strobe light or something, and you know, put on some happy music while they torture you or something, and then suddenly people's whole relationship with it changes. It's incredible the extent to which propaganda can be effective on people. Emotion 007, you're saying it's crazy to think we have our enemy slither in through our country with these means. We have to do better. Yeah, well, and it's crazy too that we've allowed this to happen. If you want to see something crazy, because Tencent is now deemed a Chinese military company, Pentagon designation, right? Do a Google search and look up how many video game companies Tencent is invested in. I don't want to go over the whole list because it would take me a long time to go over it. Look at the number of video games that Tencent maybe doesn't fully control, but at least has some investment in. It's massive. And then look at how big those games are. Look at the top played games in the world right now. And you'll find that many of them are actually Tencent games. I follow some of this stuff, of course. You know, there was a new one that just came out called Marvel Rivals, one of the most popular video games in the world right now. And it's tied to Tencent. And people were typing in the chat. And you'd think, oh, Marvel, American company, Marvel. Everyone loves Marvel, right? Or maybe used to. They're typing in the chat, and they're writing Free Taiwan. And the chat on this video game is saying, basically, you can't type that. They type in democracy for China. They type in things against the CCP. And the video game censors that speech. You cannot say it on the video game. You can't say Tiananmen Square Massacre. You can't say, you know, Free Tibet. You can't say any of that. The video game restricts it. Imagine that. And the problem you have with a lot of kids these days is they live within these ecosystems. If you have a kid who is perpetually online, constantly, not even a kid, you're talking 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, you know, even older people, constantly online, meaning the internet is their life. Social media, video games, movies, YouTube, whatever like that. They live in it. They are constantly in it. Their chat programs, every person they talk to. What happens if the environment in which they live is being controlled by a foreign adversary. And every one of those interactions, every one of those experiences is not only restricting conversations on anything that could inform them of what is really happening in the world, or of anything that would inform them of the true nature of these regimes, but also is intentionally trying to propagandize them with Chinese socialism, as we now know, according to these court documents, one person coming out and saying TikTok was doing, right? Allegedly, according to these court documents. What does it mean? If not only are they being suppressed in terms of thought and of speech, while also being manipulated to have a certain worldview and a certain perspective on the communist regime of China. And when you're also talking about, imagine, it's the chat programs, the things they're talking to their friends with, it's the social media, it's the video games, it's the movies and entertainment, and that's it, right? Maybe even more than that. And all of those programs are being controlled by the same centralized corporations, or buying shares in them to force their standards onto American companies, or are making deals with American companies to buy the data and buy access. Why are we allowing this? The number of people who have probably been brainwashed by this is astounding. Now, on the other side of it, actually I've been following some of the developments with RedNote, and it's actually interesting how fast this is devolving. There are some people online saying that the RedNote issue, the Great Exodus, it started with a lot of sparkles and rainbows, right? People are like, wow, these people are so funny because they go on RedNote, and there was one video going around and some Chinese guy messaged someone and they're like, hi, I'm your new Chinese spy, let's be friends. And you're like, oh, they're so funny. Literally stuff like that, right? Then they start finding they're having conversations with these people, and they're like, the Chinese people are like, wait, you don't have to work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day? How does that happen? And they start talking to people, oh yeah, workers' rights and so on. They're like, people are like, what's that? I've never heard of workers' rights. What you have now with these Chinese apps is they've started separate with RedNote. They started separating the Chinese users and the English users because they don't want those interactions taking place. They also now have started banning people from saying all kinds of stuff. You have Chinese users warning the American users, you can't talk about this or that or that. You get banned. People are typing in stuff that is sensitive in China, and their accounts are getting shut down. And even now, there's been reports from the Chinese users saying that if they want to post to their the US users, there was an hour delay because the Chinese censors have to monitor every communication. And so a lot of them are kind of being like, wow, okay, that's what actual lack of freedom is like. That's what actual propaganda is like. Because you have a lot of these kids who think, oh, this is the worst ever. They're banning my TikTok. They don't know what it's actually like in these countries. They have no concept of it, unfortunately. Let's see here. Judith Yakim, you're saying, CCP, you have personal will. Well, that sounds like a cult, basically, right? And the real irony is the CCP itself operates like a cult. You have to join it, you have to pay your fees, you can't leave it, and if you oppose it, they hunt you down and they possibly kill you. You know what I mean? Actually, I was it's dark humor. I was actually cracking up when I saw they labeled democracy activists as a cult. But it actually has real implications, you know what I mean? It sounds ridiculous, where we can be like, oh yeah, that's a CCP. But when you actually think of the implications of it, for like the people in Hong Kong, for example, they just had a whole bunch of trials of the Free Hong Kong protesters. A lot of them are facing, their lives are destroyed, basically. They're facing who knows how long in prison. Some of them were killed. Do y'all remember there was that video going around? There was a leaked video that came out of Hong Kong during the student protests. They brought in one of these kids, right? These student protesters, the Chinese police, right? Sat him down in a chair, and they put this helmet on. They tie him up, handcuff him, right? So he's tied to this chair like this, and they put a helmet on him. And what this helmet is It's a helmet, but it's like duct taped. And so what it does is it suffocates you. And it was a horrifying video because you watch this kid die in front of you. He suffocates, right? They kill him. And it's amazing. The CCP just made this murder helmet that they could use and put on people's heads, and they will die. It will kill them. And they handcuff them, put the helmet on, leave the room for 5 minutes, come back, the person's dead, and then do whatever they want with the body. There were reports of them loading people up on trains and shipping them into China, and we have no idea what even happened to them, right? And so, when the CCP talks about this stuff, it's like it's so ridiculous. You almost have to laugh at how stupid the laws are, but it has like real implications on again, massive human rights abuses. It's horrifying stuff. It's terrible. James Dyson is saying, why doesn't America attack China with an opposite and superior digital force to disable the CCP and essentially turn off China? Well, that's something Trump has been talking about, and I don't know what Trump's getting at, right? Trump invited CCP leader Xi Jinping to his inauguration. There's never been a case where foreign leaders have come to a presidential inauguration in the U.S. Never happened before. Xi Jinping turned that down, but he is sending an envoy. Trump was opposing the TikTok ban. I don't know. Maybe he has his own views on it, right? I don't know if he's changed that view or what. But Trump is talking about, if China wants to restrict our companies, we're going to restrict theirs. And if they want to trade with us, they need to open up. Mark Zuckerberg, when he did these public videos recently, talking about the new, getting rid of censorship at Facebook, he mentioned that he's going to be working with the incoming Trump administration to bring freedom of expression globally. And he even mentions China. The reality is with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party cannot survive without censorship. And this has been told to me by a lot of Chinese dissidents. The understanding among a lot of them is the CCP will not survive without censorship. Because a lot of people in China, they're brainwashed, unfortunately. The CCP has falsified history. The CCP has erased history. The CCP has all these fake stories of CCP heroes. The Chinese Communist Party lies about all of the persecuted groups. The Chinese Communist Party lies about the world. The Chinese Communist Party lies about itself. It restricts speech. It restricts perspectives. It restricts all these things. Even TV shows that have a theme of time travel are illegal in China because they don't want like Korean dramas that show traditional culture, because the CCP has labeled and maligned traditional culture to be a negative thing. They don't want people like having memories of it, of what the world was. And so as soon as people, and there's a lot of them, as soon as Chinese people become aware of all these lies, they turn against the CCP. This is why you have the quitting the CCP movement. Over 400 million Chinese people have publicly denounced the Chinese Communist Party and publicly affirmed they are quitting either the Chinese Communist Party, the Youth League, or the Young Pioneers. Over 400 million Chinese people. Just to emphasize what a big deal it is when they realize they've been lied to their entire lives. If the censorship is eliminated, the waking up within China would be on that scale, and the CCP would dissolve. It would just die. It would come to an end. Not to mention all the human rights abuses and the amount of blood on these people's hands, the CCP leadership. People would want Nuremberg trials. You would have Nuremberg trials in China of all the leadership were the truth to come out. And so it's a great idea that the U.S. would enforce free speech in China, or maybe say, hey, you can't censor us anymore. We're not doing business with you. What that would likely result in would be actually either the collapse of the CCP, or we would just not trade with them anymore because they probably wouldn't allow it for their survival. It's also why they hate us so much, by the way. One of the reasons why they hate us so much. They don't like people talking about this stuff. Let's see here. Eric Burney, you're saying Trump should take down China's cyber wall. That will keep the CCP busy fighting its own people for a while. Yeah, they have the Great Firewall of China. And actually, even some U.S. companies have helped them build it. Cisco Systems was being accused of this. I know there were even lawsuits over it. You have American technology companies that helped the CCP build some of these things. And personally, I think these American companies should be held liable for the things they've done. Maybe that'll happen one day as well, but we'll see. Let's see. DC's Bees. Real quick too. So the Chinese Communist Party is a couple things. There's what they call the Great Firewall, and there's what they have called Skynet. And I know this sounds ridiculous because when we think Skynet, we think like the Terminator movies, because Skynet was the name of the technology company that made the Terminators. In China, they have these. And so the Great Firewall is basically the massive system of censorship that has created basically two separate intranets. It's like the Berlin Wall, but on the digital front. And the Great Firewall prevents information getting into China and prevents information from getting out of China. And so you have a maintained illusion of false information, censored programs, and everything else. It's Orwellian, right? Even think about what people are dealing with RedNote right now, where every single comment you have going from China to the US has an hour delay because Chinese censors need to monitor every single comment. AI has made it a lot easier for them to do this as well. But the concerning thing is they're exporting that censorship elsewhere as well through these companies. The Skynet system is tied in with that. They also have, of course, a net of like surveillance cameras that are tied in with that as well. And then they have what's called the 50-cent army, which are paid, aside from the actual censors, like the Communist Party censors, they also have what's called the 50-cent army, and that's like more of a civilian force, and they pay individual Chinese people to post propaganda, CCP narratives, to argue with the enemies of the CCP, to spread lies, to upvote videos. Even in the US, if you have a video that promotes the CCP's interests, whether it's maybe maligning a group the CCP is trying to destroy, or pushing a CCP political narrative, they'll upvote those videos, they'll comment on it, they might even donate money to it. But that's all being paid for and manipulated by the CCP. They call it the 50-cent army. Huge system. And I do think the U.S. needs to do something about it, whether, as Eric Bunny says, maybe tear down the firewall. Xi Jinping, tear down this wall, right? Or we'll do it for you. Or we need to make sure that we just tear it down and force freedom onto that country, at least on the digital front. Because look, they hack us all the time. They launch cyber attacks on us all the time. We don't need to steal their intellectual property. What if we just tore down their firewall and started sending truth bombs to the people of China? What if we just brought truth and honesty and real information to China, and that was our cyber attack? Every time you hack an American company, we send a truth bomb to 1 million Chinese citizens. What if they did that? You know how fast those cyber attacks would come to an end? Imagine, right? We will bring freedom to you as you bring theft and tyranny and like spying to us. We will end your tyranny just by exposing what you actually do. Imagine if the US did that, right? Let's see here. DC's Bees, you're saying, there has never been free speech in video game chats. All game chats add restricted words. I may not agree with it, never have, but it is the way it is. And DCB's also said, all of them do it. I agree it's wrong, but if you're going to address the issue across the board. It is true. I would also say there are different degrees of it, though. And there's a difference between moderation to eliminate, community abuse, where you make it so people can't, call people derogatory names, versus actively propagandizing people. Now, I would say a lot of, I'm a child of the 90s. I remember when the internet was the Wild West. I remember when you could go online and say anything, and there was no restrict. I remember this. They've changed that over time. I'm very much aware that a lot of companies actively censor. There were things, for example, that even Ubisoft, I believe a Canadian company, is even actively monitoring people's chats and censoring them and so on. It is unfortunate that in the West, political correctness has for a while become a type of censorship as well. And so you can't criticize like the protected groups, right, quote unquote. You can't criticize the LGBTQ plus so on groups. You can't criticize the DEI stuff or anything like that, right? They do have some things like that. That's right, I'm a millennial, James. I'm like an older millennial, technically, right? You can't criticize this stuff, but they're not like trying to like actively propagandize you. And so like, I mean, and this is what I kind of get at with things. I don't support censorship. I believe very much in the marketplace of ideas. I think this stuff should come to an end. But it's different when you have like the government running the operations, and in addition to censoring things on like don't harm other members of the community, they're also saying you're not allowed to say things that expose like the crimes of the regime, and they're actively trying to propagandize you to turn against your country and support a foreign adversary and trying to like feed actual like core socialist values to you. Although some of these companies are probably trying to feed you core socialism as well. There are degrees of it, right? There's a spectrum, and the CCP is on a very far spectrum of where we could end up. I do believe we have a censorship problem in the United States. I think this is being made public now. Trump and the new FCC chair are talking about ending what they call the censorship cartel. And I do believe that because we are still a free country, you're probably going to see a lot of people who are involved in that maybe face criminal charges, or at the very least face a lot of lawsuits. And so I do think that whole thing is just going to get ripped off, and you're going to see what was lying beneath it. And that's what freedom looks like, in my opinion, right? Make online chat great again, folks. You know. Let's see here. Jerry, you're saying, and on that point too, I think it's actually good for people to an extent. I think people need to have some thicker skin. I grew up in an age where I was used to, you know, kids teasing me and calling me names, and I would call them names too. And you know what? We were better off for it because we didn't get offended by everything. You know, if somebody called me a racist name, I would probably laugh. I would often find it funny. I don't care, right? And the reason I don't care is because I grew up in an environment where it wasn't made to look like it was the end of the world if somebody said something mean to you. You know what I mean? I think the oversensitivity these days is horrible. You have people who are so limp-wristed and sensitive. They can't take anything. You know, the world's not like that. If you want to be happy, if you want to live a happy life, you don't live a happy life by trying to censor everybody and not have anything unpleasant. If you want to have a happy life, you need to make your skin a little thicker, you need to become a little tougher, and you need to not be bothered by that stuff. You don't get warm by making the sun hotter. You get warm by putting on some thicker clothes. You know what I mean? Or getting used to it. You know? You have to accept the world is not going to coddle you forever. And you will be happier if you can deal with the hardships and not be affected by them. And I think that's the where we need to head as a society, like seriously, you know what I mean? Jerry, you're saying, let's pump out time travel movies going back to traditional China and force download to all CCP citizens, LOL. Yeah, right. Actually, on a serious note, I've been talking a lot about Shenyun Performing Arts. That's one of the reasons why the CCP attacks them, is because, well, first of all, they show like human rights abuses happening in China, but also because they have a lot of pieces that show traditional Chinese culture. And it's one of the reasons why the CCP hates them. In China, they don't want people seeing the culture the CCP destroyed. But actually, I don't know if any of you ever watched K-dramas, Korean dramas. I honestly really haven't, but I have a lot of friends who do. I know one of the real popular themes with K-dramas, and I know they're becoming more popular in the US as well, is time travel. And so you'll have like this girl who's like going to a park and she falls into a pond and she finds herself getting pulled out of the water like, 1,000 years ago during one of their dynasties, right? And she's like a modern girl, living in the ancient civilization. And these shows are super popular. They're really popular, especially in Asia. And the effect of that is it's having people kind of be like, oh, wow, traditional culture was pretty nice. Wow, that's what it was like. Wow, that's what history was, like lived history, right? Maybe the closest thing we have is a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, right? Maybe that's the American equivalent, right? But on this point, that kind of theme is illegal in China. The CCP has banned that. It is illegal because the Chinese Communist Party is terrified that people will understand that the CCP is not the legitimate government of China, that the CCP usurped power, that the Chinese Communist Party destroyed Chinese culture. It doesn't represent the Chinese people. It destroyed the memory of who they are. It destroyed their values. During the Cultural Revolution, they had the campaign to destroy the four olds, right? Old beliefs, old values, old customs. They destroyed statues and art. They burned any kind of historical artifacts. They smashed the faces of all the Buddhist statues and the Taoist shrines and everything like that. They destroyed everything they could. And so anything that revives that, the CCP regards as a threat to its power. And on that note too, I was talking about Shenyun. Do you know what the slogan of Shenyun is? China before communism. China before communism. That means they're showing people the China that the CCP destroyed. And the CCP is terrified of it. Actually, I think that if they really want to, tear down the CCP, maybe we could just send Shenyun to like China, right? Anyways, folks. What day is it? Today's Thursday. I keep feeling it's Friday. I will see you tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, folks, we have a new show. Don't worry, Crossroads is not going anywhere, but we do have a new show. I'm doing a primetime show now with Roman Balmakov, Facts Matter. We have a few other guests. Tiffany Meyer's a regular on it, Cindy Druk here, Chris Bob. We're doing it on NTD, but you can watch it, I believe, on Epoch TV as well. The new show is called Primetime, and it's kind of like a lighter after the news show. We're doing it once a week right now. Again, don't worry, we're not getting rid of Crossroads. We're not. Don't worry one bit, okay? But we do have an additional show now, and you can watch that. It's called Primetime, so check it out. And also, folks, Monday next week, coming up very soon, is Inauguration Day. We're going to have a very large all-day broadcast. You can watch live the presidential speeches and everything else. And I think he wants to have like the Village People perform. It's going to be live, folks. So we're going to be there in D.C. reporting all that. So join us as well on Monday. It's going to be an interesting day. Anyways, folks, I will see you again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please like this video, share it. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.